All right, and overcast Thursday here in South Florida. Welcome back to another episode of the Marlins Hot Stove Show with Stephen Strom. I'm Kyle Sielaff. It is great to be back with you guys. We are recording this late Thursday afternoon here, so if you're not watching live and maybe watching at another point, thank you for joining us. As always, you can find us on the podcast page, YouTube, Twitter. It's all archived. So we've had a lot of fun doing this already this offseason. The programs have been long, and Steve and I anticipate having another long show tonight, man, because there is a lot going on. Winter meetings in full swing. We've got a ton of news to get to, and I'm looking forward to it. This should be a great show tonight, man.
I think it's fair to say we're going the distance this afternoon.
Yeah, we're going to try.
And there is a lot going on. You know, the Rule 5, the lottery, there's a couple of trades, obviously. And just outside of the Marlins, there's a bunch of free agent signings. Obviously, Juan Soto to the Mets, which affects the Marlins and within the division. So there's a ton to get to, Kyle. Sometimes you worry with these hot stove shows if there's enough meat on the bone, but you get weeks like this, and I'm ready to go for 5 hours.
There was a discussion earlier this morning. Do we break this thing up into two shows? I've got to look at my rundown here, Stephen. We're doing Jake Burger talk. We're doing Rule 5 draft, the MLB lottery. We've got some sound from Clayton McCulla. We've got an awesome interview coming up later with the Miami Marlins' new Vice President of Baseball Solutions, Ryan Plunkett, who's been on the job for a week. He's a busy guy. We actually had an opportunity to sit down for almost an hour with him on Tuesday, was it, or was it Monday? I'm forgetting now.
And he's also a nomad. You can't find anything online about him. So it was actually a miracle we got him on this show.
And we're saving the best for last. It is another installment of Love It or Leave It, but that's down the road, folks. That's 2 hours from now. We've got a ton to get to tonight, but I don't know, Stephen, let's hop right into the show, and we'll start the show tonight with the big news out of Dallas yesterday, and it was the acquisition of 3 prospects, Max Acosta and Echedry Vargas, a couple of middle infielders, and lefty intriguing arm Brian Mendoza from the Texas Rangers in exchange for probably the most established bat that the Marlins did have in Jake Burger. But, Stephen, your reaction to that when we found out yesterday along with everybody else?
My reaction was this is sort of what you should expect and what we've seen the last couple of months, particularly with the trade deadline. And I wrote this down, Kyle. That's now 11 players traded for 22 new prospects. And I think the big thing, and this was on MLB.com, to start the year, the preseason rankings for farm systems, the Marlins were at 29. And this was not updated. This was an article from the middle of August. The Marlins were at 15. And that's not to gloss over, you know, what Jake Burger meant to the organization, but Peter Bendix has been very clear with his plan. We're seeing it, and he's acting on it. And Jake Burger, I thought, had an incredible impact on this team when he was brought in last season, or 2 seasons ago, I guess now, during the trade deadline, and really catapulted that team with Josh Bell to the postseason. And then the following year, you know, kind of up and down. But the blueprint is this for the Marlins right now. They want to get these younger guys in their system opportunities. And we'll talk about what it opens up for a potential roster spot for one of the younger guys. But my reaction to this, Kyle, is, yeah, this is right on cue. This is part of the plan. Peter has been open about it. And here we go again. Tough to see Jake Burger leave, obviously. Incredible dude, incredible family, and a really impactful bat on the field. But this is par for the course, I think, for the Marlins and what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, you mentioned Peter Bendix, Stephen. Let's take a listen to what Peter had to say. He did meet with the media yesterday. I know a lot of fans have questions, and he even acknowledges here as well that, look, he understands their frustration.
A lot of talent to the organization. We think really highly of the 3 players that we got in return. I think they're players that just add to the overall talent base. There's 2 really good shortstops. There's another pitcher. We never have enough talent, and I think it just contributes to the vision of being as good as we can as soon as we can.
But why now for Burger? Pre our almost back-to-back 30 homer seasons. Like, what led to this decision now, I guess?
It was a really difficult decision. These always are. This was especially difficult with Jake, and ultimately we felt confident enough and strong enough in the return that we were getting for him that we thought it was the right thing to do right now.
Peter, you mentioned always the present and the future as well. How does this training specific help the present now for the team?
This particular move adds a ton of value to the organization. It adds a lot of just long-term value. It adds a lot of players that we think are going to help us for a long time. And that was the goal in this particular trade.
So by moving Jake, what does that do for like first base, third base, DH? Obviously, assuming things don't, there's still plenty of off season, but going to, let's say, spring training, does that mean like Connor at third, Jonah at first, DH can be like a revolving, like guys that need a break?
I think we have a lot of options. We still have a lot of talent on the major league team, a lot of good hitters, guys that we started to see last year, guys that we might not have seen last year that we expect to see this year. It opens up additional playing time for guys that we think are really good.
Yeah, we'll speak touch on Davis and his other sacks, but just how difficult is it to replace that power, given your ballpark and also the division you're playing?
Absolutely. There's a lot of different ways to score runs, and we're open to all the different ways to score runs. Certainly, that power is hard to replace, but I think there's a lot of different ways that we can go about making sure that we have the kind of offense that we need.
All right, Stephen. So that was Peter on the decision to trade Jake Burger. Thought there was an acknowledgement there that there was an extreme level of difficulty in doing that. Yep. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're caught between a rock and a hard place, because you and I have discussed this, but they are in a situation now where you do need to see what you have. And Jake Burger is an older guy, and I understand there's a ton of team control. Is he the guy that ultimately was going to be a part of this down the road? I think we have our answer on that now. That's a guy that blew out both Achilles, so I'm sure there's maybe even some concern there. But I think it was pretty apparent that, and we've chatted about this, they're not going to deviate from this plan. They genuinely feel as if they have some really, really good talent. And the bottom line is that I wouldn't say this will be a difficult or trying year. It may end up being one of those years, but this is going to be a year for this front office to evaluate a ton, and I mean a ton, of young talent to see if all of these guys with all of this team control can ultimately be the ones that can find sustained success for the organization moving forward.
Yeah, and I think on that, Kyle, and you had mentioned just the opportunities for these other players to jump in front. There was a little bit of question on where Jake Burger was going to play next year. Let's be honest. I mean, it would be very hard for me to take the bat out of the hands of Jonah Bride after what I saw last season. It would be really tough for me to move around Connor Norby after what we saw at third base. I mean, the diamond from, it was a competitive spot. I mean, I really liked what I saw from Norby at third. Xavier Edwards, of course, needs to get better defensively at shortstop, but he showed some great growth, I thought, last year, and you can't take the bat out of his hands. Otto Lopez, he did everything to play. I mean, you just couldn't sit him as well. Bride at first. But this now opens up the opportunity, and I think this goes back to what Peter ultimately wants his organization to be, and that's versatile players, right? And you're going to have someone like Davison De Los Santos, and he played 38 games at first base last year for Jacksonville and played 10 at third base, but he was originally a third baseman. You're going to see him in the mix, I'm sure, but that's a guy that hit 40 home runs that you say, okay, like he's 21. Like, let's see what he can do now, kind of thing. And I don't know if it was more like we've seen what we've seen from Jake Burger and we're not sure, I guess he kind of is what he is at this point, which is, a solid Major League Baseball player. But, this is the luxury of having a lot of prospects and exciting prospects that did well last year that now you can insert, plug and play, and see what you got.
And there is something too, limited defensively, 28, turning 29 years old. There will be naysayers. There was people on both sides of the fence in terms of if they liked the deal, didn't like the deal. We're not really here to give our opinion on if it was a good deal or not, simply to listen to what Peter had to say. I thought Keith Law had a very good thing in The Athletic, praising the Marlins for the deal, and certainly others out there that would question why maybe your most premier bat in the lineup is something you feel like you need to get rid of now.
Totally. And I think the big thing, Kyle, was the pre-arb thing. I think that's sort of what was puzzling for fans, that he was under, team control. Why now? Why now?
Sure. And another thing too, Stephen, I think it's very hard because I'm a fan too. You fall in
Right.
love with the guys because of their personalities and who they are as human beings. You'd be very hard pressed to find a better human in baseball than Jake
100%.
Berger and his wife Ashlyn, and now the two kids that they have. They're a beautiful family, an amazing family. It reminded me a lot of Luis Arraez in a sense that he was a fan favorite. He was the darling. He really was, in some respects, the face of the franchise within reason. But people fell in love with him. But what we also saw is when the Marlins made that trade last May, Otto Lopez stepped in. He got an opportunity. He played just about as well. There was some metrics you could find there were like,
Dude.
oh, that maybe is actually better for what this team needs down the road.
Right.
So I understand it. I totally understand it. I really don't have an opinion one way or another if it was good, bad, or somewhere in between. But I do think a lot of the frustration, not from the baseball side of it, is the human aspect from the fans. Like, why, right? Why? He was so fun. It was the Burger King thing in the ballpark. I get it.
I get it too. And, again, we want to thank Jake, and he was
Oh.
a great interview. Every time you wanted to get him, Kyle, I mean, he was up for it. So from a human standpoint, I know you and I will be cheering for him. He's actually reunited with Skip Schumacher, who is in the front office with the Texas Rangers. I'm sure maybe he had a say as well. But the Marlins got back some solid prospects. They already, and I'll read it to you right now, Vargas is now the 16th best Marlins prospect, and Acosta is now the 17th ranked prospect. We talked about Mendoza. He's not up there right now. 20-year-old from Venezuela. He's coming off a big year with the Rangers high A ball affiliate, posting a 2.32 ERA with over 100 strikeouts and 101 innings. So again, the blueprint. And I tweeted out, this is what structure, and this is what the plan has always been. It's just being like, again, it's to me, it's just reinforcing what his idea is, and he's going to continue to do this until the organization is in the position to have sustained success.
Hey, and one other thing, I showed that graphic again. The young man, Max Acosta, I know he wasn't previously ranked in the Ranger system. From what we understand and from what we were told this morning, Stephen, Peter and his team extremely high on Max. They do believe that come opening day, when the new rankings come out, that he's going to be right there in the thick of things. So look, would certainly echo what you have said. I think you're going to continue to see these type of moves. Not that there is a ton of established major league talent on the roster now from a position player standpoint. There's a lot of great pitchers, but from a position player standpoint, the man with the longest tenure now would be Jesus Sanchez. But we'll see. Again, I think it'll end up, ultimately benefiting the Marlins down the road. And we do wish Jake Berger the very best moving forward. Moving on, there's another new addition here to the Marlins 40-man roster. The Marlins selected Liam Hicks in the Rule 5 phase of the Major League Draft. In the Rule 5 draft yesterday. Young man coming over from the Tigers organization. He was acquired by the Tigers last year in the Carson Kelly deal with the Texas Rangers. We do have some sound from Peter Bendix on Liam Hicks, but Stephen, first, your thoughts on this addition as well, a young catcher for the Marlins.
Yeah, and in a position where, the Marlins had some guys in and out from last year, right? They signed Christian Bethancourt, Ali Sanchez got some run. The Marlins are in a position now where they can legitimately look at a guy like Hicks, and you can legitimately say, this guy could potentially be the backup to Nick Fortes. He's proven he can play. He's, again, one of those 4A guys, right? Like, what is it? It's kind of like Jonah Bride. Like, he's got to get some playing time, and it was tough to crack a lineup for Hicks, but excited. And the Marlins have had some pretty good luck with Rule 5 guys, Dan Uggla, Justin Bohr, and Dane Myers as well.
Yep. Okay. I do have some thoughts on it. First, let's hear from Peter Bendix on the acquisition of Liam Hicks in the Rule 5 draft yesterday.
Started catching full-time in pro ball year and a half ago, and showed a lot of tools, a lot of really good defensive ability, and all the things that we look for in a catcher. And his approach at the plate is unique for anybody, especially for a catcher. His bat-to-ball ability, plate discipline is excellent. Wonderful things about the makeup, the kind of person he is. We think he's got a real chance to make our team.
All right, so that was Peter on Liam Hicks. As a periodic reminder, when you do take somebody in the Rule 5 draft, that individual has to not only remain on the 40-man roster, but the 26-man roster in some capacity all year long. That individual can spend time if they do get injured on the injured list. But if Liam Hicks does not make the major league roster coming out of spring training, he would need to be offered back to his previous team. That would be the Detroit Tigers. So that's the situation with Liam Hicks. Now, I mean, obviously, if this goes well, he's going to have to get some playing time. This is very similar. If you remember last year, the Washington Nationals took Nasim Nunez from the Miami Marlins. They stashed him away on the active roster all year long, barely played. He started to get a little bit more run down the stretch. He got a little bit of burn in September. But Liam Hicks, this is going to be a very interesting situation, Stephen, because the catching position is not one where you can stash a guy away.
No,
I guess in theory you could if you wanted to carry 3 catchers. I just don't see a path for that coming out of spring training. Is it feasible? Sure. Do I see it happening? No. So if indeed Liam Hicks makes the major league roster coming out of spring training, he's never played above AA. This would be his first crack at things, obviously, in the big leagues. He's going to have to play, even if that's twice a week. Nick Fortes cannot catch 150 games. He's not going to be, he can't be an Iron Man back there. I mean, that is a taxing position. So I wouldn't say this is a risky pick, because ultimately, if you feel like it's not going to work, you can simply offer him back, I think, for $10,000 or something to his old team. But it's a very interesting pick to take a catcher in the Rule 5 phase of the MLB draft. Very, very interesting to me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I'm excited to see what Max Garrett and company is going to work on, because we got a chance to chat with Max, the director of catching with the Marlins. He's going to get his hands on this Hicks individual. And, you know, again, like you said, Kyle, you're right, man. It is an interesting pick, because a catcher, you really can't just stash and hide. You know, you have to play him. You have to have, unless you want to carry 3 catchers, like you said, that's not usually an ideal situation. This young man could potentially easily be the backup catcher to Nick Fortes.
You know, and the other thing too, and it sounds like he's got some offense to him, and that's a bit of a rarity in today's game. And we were chatting about that with Max last week. This is a young man who's never sniffed AAA that has to develop a rapport with the likes of Sandy Alcantara, Edward Cabrera, Ryan Weathers, Braxton Garrett, Max Meyer, others, right? Sorry, I'm forgetting somebody, obviously, but
Cabrera, no,
sure, that's not easy to do. I mean, he's going to have to develop that rapport with some established pitchers and a Cy Young Award winner that's coming off of Tommy John surgery. So there's a lot in it for this young man. This is an amazing opportunity from Liam Hicks. I wouldn't say there's an uphill battle, but he's going to have to work his tail off. That's just a position where you've got to be 100% certain that and confident that that young man can do the job coming out of spring training. Okay, next topic tonight. I know it's one that hurt some Marlins hearts on Tuesday, some Marlins fans' hearts. It was the MLB draft lottery. This was a graphic that we showed everybody last week, Stephen. The Rockies and the Marlins had a near 22.5% chance, the odds-on favorites, to ultimately get the number 1 selection in the Major League Baseball draft in the summer here of 2025. And the Miami Marlins ended up with the 7th overall pick. The worst position that they could possibly pick was number 8. I'll probably talk out of both sides of my mouth here, because I think I said last week I love the MLB draft lottery. At the moment, on Thursday, December 12th, I don't love it, right?
Tough.
But
really,
it is
tough.
what it is.
Really,
they weren't going to pick any worse than 8th. And I hate to see the quite literal lottery ball roll the wrong way here for the Marlins. But I also love what Major League Baseball is doing. You know, they're not incentivizing teams to stink for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And unfortunately, and by the way, the real unfortunate part of this, the Washington Nationals, look here, they had a 10% chance. So not an awful percentage chance to get it, but the Washington Nationals with Dylan Cruz and James Wood and all these young kids might end up with Ethan Holiday, and then you got a battle of the Beltway there with Jackson and Ethan in the coming years. So that's how the lottery ball rolled for Miami.
And I know a lot of fans are like, oh, it's just this is right on brand with the Marlins. But I will remind you, 2 years ago, the Guardians had a 2% chance of getting the number 1 pick, and they beat out 8 other teams with better odds. The A's, the Royals, the Rockies, each of those teams had an 18% chance. So this happens, and this is for us, the ugliness of the MLB lottery, because I know we were both looking forward to potentially bringing in an Ethan Holiday into the organization, but you got to trust Frankie Pilieri and the entire staff that they're going to make the best pick possible for the organization. They'll get number 7 and on you go, but this isn't a case of, oh my gosh, of course. No, this has happened, and it happened with the Guardians 2 years ago.
And look, everybody that's coming off a bad year would love that number 1 overall pick. But the bottom line here too is within player development, you need to draft well, but most importantly, you need to develop. If you can't develop, it really doesn't matter if you're picking in the top 5 every year, which is now not feasible within the system. But this genuinely all comes down to development. Whoever you take in the 9th round, should they accept the $40,000 to become a pro ball player, depending on how well you can develop, there's a decent chance within reason that individual is going to get to the big leagues. So again, I'm sure they had on their board, boy, if we get 1, 2, or 3, we feel like we have a franchise changing, altering type guy. It's quite literally not how the lottery ball fell for the Marlins, but they are going to pick 7th, a top 10 pick. It all comes down to development. So we've talked about Jake Berger. We've done the Rule 5 draft. We've done the Major League Baseball lottery. The winter meetings have wrapped up, Stephen, in Dallas, and we'll talk about some of the stuff on the back end here. But dude, it was a crazy 3 to 4 days out there, not just for the Marlins, but the entire industry as well.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I did want to bring it back, though, to Monday, Kyle, with Marlins manager Clayton McCulla, who did speak with the media on Monday. I have a couple of bites I do want to share because some of them stuck out. And I want to start here with building off culture, specifically because when you get a new manager, I think the first thing they say, we need to develop a new culture, create, because before, and that's not the case, which is a really beautiful thing. I think it's a compliment to Skip Schumacher. And here was Clayton McCulla on not building a new culture, but sort of just tweaking it.
Peter, leading up to this, how important it was going to be, just somewhat, the culture here, and this sometimes gets blown out to the clubhouse culture. I think things here were great. You talk to guys, they enjoyed, each other, and even through a difficult season, maybe for us to create some, environments again where we're taking where these players.
Looks like we're having some technical difficulties with the
we'll bow out of that
sound, but you got the point. I mean, it wasn't a case of the clubhouse culture. Players enjoyed being here. The players enjoyed each other. It was obviously from a wins and loss record, a tough season, and a season that they of course wanted to go the other way, but it wasn't it. And we can both honestly say we were in the clubhouse every day. It never got toxic. It never got guys turning on each other. They came in with the same work ethic, the same plan to win every day. And it's going to be similar to Clayton McCulla and his message, because that's sort of what he's relayed to not only us, but to the entire organization. Now, speaking of the coaching staff, not everyone has been hired. Not every place has been filled. They do have a hitting coach. They do have a pitching coach. The other part to this is Clayton McCulla is extremely young, and his coaching staff is even younger. Here was Clayton on the eagerness to get going with the entire coaching staff.
Extremely excited about this. I think the energy that's come in, and you're doing your best to try to get to know people through phone conversations, text, through this process, and video calls, in person, and the quality of the people, continue to shine through. So I think we have this far really excited about not only the technical acumen of those that we've hired, but then also their willingness to kind of understand with where we are, and we have to roll our sleeves up, and we have a lot of work to do. A lot of us taking on positions for the first time. I think they are super motivated to just come in and ready to get to work and get us moving.
Kyle, just your reaction.
Well, I think this all comes down to development. I think it's something that I just discussed. I think Clayton McCulla is the top dog, obviously, within that clubhouse. And I think the message is pretty clear about, I don't know if, well, I will say expectations, and I'm not talking simply about wins and losses, but the expectation to get 1% better every single day this is no secret. This is not the Yankees with guys that have been playing for 10 to 12 years. They know how to go about their business. They know what they need to do to get themselves right. Clayton McCulla and his entire coaching staff, a very young one, Stephen, they are tasked more so with the development of these young players. Again, you get 10-year, 8-time All-Stars. You just keep the train going in the right direction. They know what to do. There's a lot of young kids here, a lot of young kids that don't know what it's like to play in the big leagues, that don't know the rigors of a 162-game season. So I get the sense that they're very energetic, and a lot of these guys, they have that like developmental background, whether it's drive line and the inclination, like how do we get these guys better? I feel like that maybe is what I should say. I feel like they all tick on that same wavelength. How do we get every one of these guys a little bit better? Because that's ultimately, if you get to that point to how do we get them a little bit better, if they constantly get a little bit better, you evaluate at the end of the season to see where you're at. And then you have to decide, did we get them a little bit better enough? Are they maxed out? Can they continue to get better? Are they a part of our future or not? But that's where they're going here.
Well, I think a big player that we've seen his potential. He's got some of the nastiest stuff across baseball. And if you believe in development and you think that this individual can continue to develop, he's a frontline starter. Now, I say all this because when asked, Clayton McCulla said one of the players he is most eager to start coaching, developing, managing. Well, here was his answer.
I'm really excited about Edward Cabrera. And again, just had the chance for the last few years, a few opportunities where, competing against him, and just kind of know what guys, in those hitters meetings, they weren't fans of having to, kind of go up there and take that at bat. And, again, it's young, great stuff. Like there's so much more in that in the tank there, and so I think he's a really exciting one for me just because like the upside is so big, and I feel like hey, it's gonna not everybody's path to success is linear, right? And so but like it's real ability that can win major league games.
Well, again, sorry for that. I don't know what's going on with the buffering, but I think you got the point.
It's all right.
A little laggy, but just your reaction to that, Kyle.
Well, I found it to be very interesting. There's a lot of guys to choose from, and I was not surprised, because surprised would be the wrong word, because I think a lot of us have seen in short spurts what Edward Cabrera is capable of, but wouldn't have shocked me if he said really excited to see Sandy come off Tommy John surgery, really excited to see how Jesus Luzardo and Ryan Weathers bounce back from injury, really excited to see how Xavier Edwards and Otto Lopez, the Keystone combo, maybe up the middle, improve upon really a big year one in the major leagues. But he immediately went to Edward Cabrera, who to me, he's a wild.
Where are you at with him, Kyle? Yeah, because we've all seen it, man. We've all seen it. But we've also seen the 6 walks in 2 1/3 innings, But then those 8 strikeouts through 2-3 innings keep you lingering, And what is it? What is it? And if it does click, there's not one manager, anyone in baseball that has ever told us, yeah, like I don't think another team would pick him. Like, no, like. If this guy figures it out, he is a front line, one of the best, nastiest pitchers in all of baseball.
He's 26 years old. He's not arbitration eligible. Well, he is. I think he's super 2. So he's first year arbitration eligible this year. So he's gonna get paid a little bit. But I don't anticipate being that a whole lot. He's often injury prone. He's made 20 starts last year with a 4.95 ERA. At the end of the year, it felt like he figured it out. I really don't know, Stephen. I don't know. It seems like an impossible player to get rid of and just let him walk.
Yep.
If they feel like maybe there's another team out there that feels like, boy, the Marlins couldn't figure him out, but we will. I know it's a tough pill to swallow as leaders within the organization, but I feel like we're reaching a tipping point where you've started to get enough of a sample size to maybe he's a liability.
Yeah.
Maybe this is just how it's always going to be. And if that's how it's always going to be, making 20 to 25 starts with 2 spurts on the injured list and wild inconsistency, you can't have that. Now, the other side of it for me, and I feel like we said this last year, but 2025 is huge. Is this his last chance in the Miami Marlins organization to prove that he is a guy that you can rely on, not just every 5 days, that he has to prove there, number one, that he can go make 25 to 30 starts. That's not easy to do. But you can't have a guy out there pitching to a 5 ERA, occasionally costing 7 1/3 shutout innings, and you're left scratching your head like, we didn't see that for the last 8 starts, but now we've seen it twice in a row. What's going on? We'll see.
Kyle, I think the big thing and the biggest difference, two of them actually. One, Peter Bendix has shown the ability, he'll move on. I mean, Christian Bethancourt was his guy that he brought in, and he was gone.
I agree.
You know, Tim Anderson was his guy, and he moved on. And he's had some great finds out of Lopez. We've talked about it, some of the bullpen pieces. But my point here is Peter Bendix isn't going to screw around. If he doesn't think that it's the best part for the future, he's not going to put up with it. Now, the second part to this is it's the first time, I think, in the organization that he's got guys behind him. He's got Thomas White behind him. I'm not saying Thomas White's going to get to the majors this year, guys, but he's got Thomas White there. He's got Noble Meyer there. He's got Robbie Snelling there. He has a lot of pitchers behind him. Adam Major, right? I mean, even let's talk about real quick, and then we'll get to our interview. But let's talk about the 5 in the rotation right now. Okay, let me just no particular order. Sandy, Ryan Weathers, Braxton Garrett, Jesus Luzardo, Edward Cabrera, and then on the outside looking in, someone like Max Meyer, someone like Adam Major. The point being is, if Peter Bendix is willing to move on from someone like Jake Berger, who has had, we talked about, some really good years, why wouldn't he do the same with Edward Cabrera?
I agree with you, and I'm actually looking. I'm looking at some of those potential candidates. I agree with you. The player is just so hard to get rid of.
I know. Listen,
so
I know
hard,
it.
which I'm sure if we wrestle with it here on a Thursday in December, I can only imagine as things go sideways at points during the season, how head scratching that is for a baseball operations department. Now, the good thing is that there's a dozen new human beings with a pair of eyeballs each year. They're going to lay eyes on this guy.
Yep.
New pitching coaches, assistant pitching coaches, directors of pitching, a manager. You know, can you get something to click? Sometimes, in this case, for a lot of these guys, it really is almost like a change of scenery. You're going to put the same uniform on, but we're going to put name tags on in spring training. And hi, my name is. This is a fresh start for a lot of guys. If for some reason any of them were feeling like I need a change of whatever, I mean, this is a fresh start. A lot of new eyeballs on you, a chance to prove yourself. And here's the thing. As I look at this, the 3 guys that are really going to knock on the door, Robbie Snelling, Adam Major, and Max Meyer, if they don't do anything, if they were to trade, there's a lot of reports the Marlins could trade Jesus Luzardo. Wouldn't surprise me. If they do, I think Max Meyer would probably slot into that 5th spot in the rotation.
Sure.
If they don't make any additional moves, you've got Max Meyer, Robbie Snelling, and Adam Major lined up, probably the 3-headed monster in your AAA rotation to start the year.
Yep.
Don't anticipate Thomas White or Noble Meyer getting there this year, but there's and you can never have enough pitching, but there's a lot of depth now. I mean, conceivably,
that's the difference, man. And that to me. So go ahead, Kyle. No, I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you would hate to see 3 guys go down early, but you would also feel pretty darn good if, like, all of a sudden Max Meyer, Robbie Snelling, and Adam Major, who we haven't seen a lot of outside of Max, and we've seen some video of the other 2, that they would have to come into this rotation. So all of a sudden, even Valente Belloso, if you add those 4 in the 5 without any trades, you've got 9 starting pitchers that you feel like would give you an opportunity to win. So
100%. And that's what, going back to all this, Kyle, about building and intensifying this foundation, this is what we're talking about, man. And I don't know if you were going to give me my moment here about what I tweeted about. This is Peter Bendix intensifying this foundation. I'm going to give a little lesson here to everyone. Okay. The definition of a foundation, a strong foundation, serves as the primary support structure for any building, distributing its weight evenly across the ground and ensuring stability, preventing potential damage or collapse if not built properly. Essentially, without a strong foundation, A structure cannot stand firm and is susceptible to shifting, cracking, or settling over time. That is what I'm talking about right there. If Edward Cabrera, and we want Cappy to do great this year. We know what it could look like. But if it doesn't, guess what? You don't have to keep running your head through the same wall. And I think that is the luxury here that I'm hoping these young guys in the farm system really pan out, because then you're going to look back at December 12th, 2024 and be like, now I understand why the trade for Berger, why the trade for Jazz, why the trade for these guys, because this is how you build sustained success, where if this guy doesn't work, okay, cool. We got the next one coming up. He's already ready. He's already ready. He's already through the system. That's my rant.
You know, I thought it was important that Peter acknowledged that he understands how frustrating it can be for the fans, because it's very understandable, right? Like, you know, it's not easy. It's not easy to see some of these guys go, and I don't want to necessarily beat a dead horse, but I do believe in their plan, man. I really do. I mean, I know sometimes it's hard to, you know, see the forest and the daylight through the trees, but I do think they are very serious when they say we want to be as good as we can, as long as we can, as quick as we can. And I really do believe that they have an opportunity here to do it sooner rather than later, because a lot of these guys, Stephen, they're knocking on the door. I mean, even if in the, you know, in when you think about time frame, even a Noble Meyer and like a Thomas White, like they're knocking on the door in terms of like the plan. I'm not saying that's 2025.
Sure.
Certainly that should be expected in 2026. That's going to be here before you know it, right?
Yep.
So, again, I know some of this stuff is not easy to swallow, but I believe in what they're doing.
Me too.
I do believe that they're headed down the right path. I know when you have all of this young talent that it can be difficult. There will be learning curves. There will be bumps. There will be bruises. This is a loaded division. We can talk about some of that stuff later with the Juan Soto signing. It's incredible. But anyway, I think we've talked enough about that and some of those conversations and some of those bites there from Clayton McCulla in Dallas. We are going to get to our interview with Ryan Plunkett. This is nearly an hour, so Stephen and I will step aside. We chatted with Ryan on Tuesday, but first wanted to remind everybody about Monster Jam coming back to Lone Depot Park January 25th and 26th. Stephen and I, we told you this a couple of weeks ago. We were out there last year, man. Neither one of us got up there in the Gravedigger, but it's a fun experience to be a part of at Lone Depot Park. So make sure you come out in 2025. Again, that's a little over a month away. So you can do all that by going to marlins.com/monsterjam. And now we can send it off to our interview with the Miami Marlins Vice President of Baseball Solutions, Ryan Plunkett. Okay, well, joining us now on the Marlins Hot Stove Show is another, maybe the newest member of the organization. Ryan Plunkett is joining us. Last week, he was named as the Vice President of Baseball Solutions for the Miami Marlins. Stephen and I are intrigued. We have so many darn questions. But, Ryan, thank you for joining us tonight. How you doing a week in here?
Doing all right. No, thank you guys for having me on. Excited to get to talk.
Well, we want to chat baseball, but I want to start with, could you take me back to the interview process when you were the lead lifeguard back home for 3 summers, Ryan?
That is correct. You guys did some digging. But no, there's a man-made sandy bottom pool in my hometown. It's like a chlorinated pond. I grew up swimming there every summer. And as a kid, I always wanted to, looked up to the lifeguards, wanted to be a lifeguard. So that was my first dream job. Baseball was my second dream job. So I've been very lucky to only have a couple of jobs in my life, and I liked both of them. But that interview process was probably not the most rigorous beyond the swimming.
First guy, Stephen, we've chatted with, his dream job was to be a lifeguard.
How about that?
Second was working in Major League Baseball. I love this.
That's great priorities.
Yeah, I suppose. I always loved baseball. Loved playing baseball. But at the youngest age, I guess before thinking about MLB, I'd swim in the morning and play baseball at night. So
you saved any lives, Ryan? Did you have to jump in? Yeah. Did you ever have to provide a flotation device?
I did have to jump in occasionally. Can't say anyone was ever in terrible danger. I think they probably would have been fine without me. But did have to jump in the pool once in a while. So.
All right, Stephen, you can really press him now on the roles and responsibilities here if you'd like.
Yeah, way to start it off, Kyle. Ryan, I this is the typical first interview question, but tell us a little bit about you growing up, where you grew up, how you got into baseball. Just kind of give it to us all, and we'll bounce off of that.
For sure. Yeah. So I originally grew up in the Boston area, like a half hour, 45 minutes south of Boston in Abington, Massachusetts. It's like if you split Boston and Cape Cod in half, we're kind of like right in the middle. So grew up a really big Red Sox fan and a Red Sox household. I know baseball is typically kind of seen as like a father-son activity, and my dad would play catch with me in the yard. But love of baseball really came from my mom. She grew up a really big Red Sox fan. She nowadays doesn't hesitate to remind me that she suffered through a lot of Red Sox misery, and then I happened to be born like in the golden age for all of Boston sports. So I was growing up. I loved playing baseball, loved watching baseball. It was sort of like our rule in the house was like to watch the game with her. I had to finish my homework, and it ended up working out pretty well. That she forced me to do homework. I liked math quite a bit, and doing my math homework, in hindsight, probably helped me get a job in baseball. So kind of came full circle there, but loved playing, was a mediocre high school player at best. And kind of, I think a lot of us, like on the nerd side, like we wanted to understand why we weren't very good, and tried to like dig into the numbers a little bit and learn. So growing up in high school, I stumbled across like Fangraphs, which, online blog for reading about baseball analytics and whatnot. And that was just kind of like a light bulb moment for me. So stopped playing, started looking into the math of baseball, and things just kind of spiraled from there. So grew up loving the game, big Red Sox fan, and, was eventually got lucky enough to get a job in the industry for sure.
Ryan, what are some of your earliest baseball memories? Obviously, that's a cathedral at Fenway. It's one of our favorite places to go. But, as a family, I know we've all gone with our mom and dad and like had those special moments growing up. Was it those early memories at Fenway that kind of captivated you and propelled you into this love for the game?
Yeah, Fenway's amazing. Still one of my favorite parks to visit. We actually got to go as a family this year. I worked for the Phillies in the past, and the Phillies played in Boston this year. So got tickets for my parents and the extended family, and we went together to watch it at Fenway. It was my first time going as a visitor, which was kind of cool and kind of different. But yeah, grew up going to a ton of games at Fenway. We were close enough that you could drive down to Pawtucket and see the Pawtucket Red Sox play. At that time, there was their AAA affiliate. And there was also the Brockton Rocks of the Can-Am League played like pretty much down the street from us. So got to see some like decent summer ball games there as well. Those were some of the big ones. And the Cape Cod League was fairly close to us as well. My grandparents had a house in West Dennis. So we would go to a lot of the YD Red Sox games, Yarmouth Dennis in the Cape League. Went to a lot of those summer camps. So loved watching baseball, loved playing baseball. A lot of the parks in the town where we lived were right around the corner from me. So we'd, walk to the Little League games together. And I don't really know what about baseball in particular drew me in. I love all sports, still support all Boston sports beyond baseball, which I know makes me pretty unpopular in most parts of the country. But baseball in particular was always kind of my favorite. And yeah, Fenway is unbelievable. I was fortunate enough to be, born in a history that had such a rich sports history, born in a town like that. So it was pretty cool. I don't know like what specifically drew me in, but yeah, something about the place, the stadium, the team, definitely just kind of like hooked me from a young age.
So you were in high school and you start to kind of play around with numbers. It's funny you mentioned Fangraphs. Kyle and I use the same thing just for broadcast purposes, but Ryan, it was sort of taboo, the whole analytics thing. And I know you're young, I'm young, but it was still kind of like in its early stages. So what sort of direction did you think that you could get into? I mean, it was really, if you want to get into baseball, you want to be a GM, you want to be, a coach or whatever it may be. Maybe those analytical jobs weren't there at the time. So what did you always think it was, though, with numbers and analytics? What did you think your sort of path was into baseball as a job?
Yeah, I always hoped that there would eventually be a job in the analytics sphere. But yeah, like you said, was just kind of like burgeoning, just starting out, and didn't have a ton of popularity. You know, I read Fangraphs, I read Moneyball, I watched the movie Moneyball, and those were all kind of like light bulb moments for me. Like this, you know, could actually be a living, you know, maybe. I always say like I'm super lucky and super blessed that like my hobby ended up becoming my job, which is cool. I mean, relatedly, it kind of means you need to find a new hobby. So I'll definitely take that trade off. But like, yeah, I grew up, I wanted to, you know, finish my homework so I could read on Fangraphs. And now Fangraphs has kind of become, you know, my job to some extent, which is unbelievable opportunity and so much fun. But yeah, you know, I enjoy watching baseball. I definitely wouldn't consider myself a scout. I'm definitely not a coach. I was a bad player. I'd be a worse coach. So I had a feeling if there was going to be a path in, it would be through the numbers, and was fortunate enough to latch on with the Phillies, and they kind of forgot to kick me out at the end. I stuck around there for a while, but yeah, I was hopeful there'd be some path as an analyst or something like that, but realized, you know, a lot of luck along the way too.
Ryan, Stephen's going to hate me for asking this. Do you think Moneyball was romanticized at all? The movie itself.
Easy.
For sure. I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. They had a pretty good pitching
Brad
staff.
Pitt
right?
was
That's
so
some money
good in
locked
it,
up.
though, right, Ryan? I mean, Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, it was a great combo, 1-2 punch.
No, yes, great movie. I'm maybe not the cinematic masterpiece that we all remember it as. And I'm not sure the story itself is like as underdog as they often like make it seem. But no, great movie. Not sure it's like an all-time classic, but in terms of, you know, explaining to people what, you know, I wanted to do when I grew up, or stuff like that, it is very helpful as like a cultural touchstone, if you will.
I was going to ask you that because I joke about that, and it's a hot topic amongst the baseball community. But how much did the movie inspire you and kind of drive your aspirations at like, oh, there was a guy like kind of like me. I didn't play more than high school, and I can't coach, I can't manage, but I like numbers. How aspirational and inspirational was that for you?
Yeah, I think it was cool to see that it could be done. Yeah, like I was always, you know, gonna, I think, believe in myself and be confident that I can do it. But of course, like seeing someone else like chart that path for you and do something like that, you know, gives you some hope that, you know, maybe you could be next. So I certainly don't have the looks of Brad Pitt, but was optimistic that could have, you know, some of the brains of Jonah Hill and try to do something like that along the way. So it was inspirational in some sense, and yeah, cool story. Just knowing that jobs like that exist, and there are people out there that are like just as weird as us, right? Like Fangraphs was cool, and like reinforced that there's like actually a community of people that like, you know, want to read about baseball and think about baseball super analytically and quantitatively. And you have plenty of friends at school that are, you know, are really big baseball fans, but like the level of conversation or like the topics you want to discuss with them are just different, you know, and knowing there's a community of people out there that think similarly, that, you know, are interested in the same kind of things as you is kind of empowering, kind of inspiring for sure.
So, Ryan, we actually do have a couple things in common. The first one being that I went to the Harvard of New Jersey, Kean University, and you actually went to Harvard. Why Harvard, and just how are you here today to like speak about it? And is it that hard? Like, just I've never talked to actually someone that went to Harvard.
I promise. We're not that different. No, school was amazing. I definitely never expected to have an opportunity like that. I grew up, like I said, in the Boston area. So as a kid, I was familiar with Harvard, and knew it was, you know, a great school, like really old institution.
The best school ever, maybe. He's like, yeah, it's a pretty good school.
Famous alums, but it was never necessarily a goal of mine. You know, I always took high school and school seriously. My parents always pushed me to do well in school, but geographically, I knew I wanted to stay on the East Coast. I wanted to be close to home. I'm an only child. My parents are important to me. I didn't want to move too far away, so I wanted to stick relatively close to home. Wanted to do something that you know, was reasonable for our family from a financial perspective as well. And although the sticker price at like schools like that in the Ivy League is always, you know, really eye popping, they do a lot to make things reasonable for you to attend and kind of like meet you where your needs are. So ended up, it was really close to home. It was a good school. It was the cheapest financial option for us among the schools that I'd applied to. And it was a cool opportunity. It was exciting to go there. Met so many people that were so smart in so many different ways. And they all, do way more impactful things than help with baseball. Meet like doctors, lawyers, people doing cancer research. It's crazy. And of course, I'm proud of my job, but it's not rocket science. I think it's a cool job, but we're not necessarily changing the world here. But no, it was an awesome experience. It was fun staying close to home. Still have a lot of friends in the Boston area because of that. And it was convenient for getting home for the holidays and everything like that too. So can't complain.
Ryan, this will be contentious for you. I grew up right outside of Cornell, and I had season tickets for hockey, and obviously it's a very big rivalry. How many Cornell Harvard hockey games did you attend during your time at Harvard?
Yeah, I would go to some of the hockey games. They did a decent amount of promos of the hockey games, the basketball games, the Bean Pod every year.
Yeah.
Harvard hockey playing at the Garden was a lot of fun. The football games at Harvard Stadium were cool. The game with Harvard Yale. It was always fun at the end of the year. So it obviously can't compete with some of the other like college sports rivalries, college sports experiences. But in terms of going to games and like the athletic experience, had a lot of fun going to those ones. I guess on my like freshman housing application, I wrote that I liked baseball a lot. So it was like a semi-random rooming. Like you didn't get to pick your roommates. They tried to match people up that had similar interests, but I actually got placed in a 3-person room. 2 of the guys were varsity baseball players, and then it was me. So I got to go to some of their baseball games as well and got to know the team a little bit through them, which was fun. But yeah, Harvard athletics, there's decent culture there. And the hockey games for sure were always a pretty good time.
Let me ask you this, and we can really move forward here into your new role here, because
I got one more Harvard question when you're done.
I do as well. I was just wondering, Ryan, and I'm sure you've spoken on panels before. There's no singular way to get into this industry, obviously, and there's many different roles and things you can do. What was your area of study? Did you go to Harvard with the intention of working in baseball, or what were you studying in to try to help you get to this, or did this all kind of just fall into your lap?
Yeah, I think I definitely caught a few breaks along the way. But I did, in some sense, I viewed school as like a vehicle to like help propel me to the career that I wanted to have. So I alluded to reading Fangraphs, in middle school and high school, and a lot of teams post jobs on Fangraphs, and in the job descriptions you can read about the qualifications and the things they're looking for when they hire. So I'd always, in high school, I knew I wasn't qualified for these jobs, and like I said, I really wanted to be a lifeguard. So I wasn't looking at them that seriously, but I could tell that teams were looking to hire folks that had studied math or applied math. They'd knew how to program. They'd study statistics and things of that nature, study physics. So I liked numbers. I liked math in high school. I took a statistics class my freshman year at college, and I liked that. I knew teams were looking for that. And over time, I declared I was going to study statistics, and a lot of the statistics classes or computer science classes would count towards that major as well. And I realized, I could get a double major in statistics and computer science without adding too much to my course load. So I studied both of those. I'd never taken either of those classes in high school. I just knew I liked math and liked numbers. Decided, a lot of teams are hiring people that had those majors. At least they were saying that on Fangraphs. I tried a couple of those classes and I liked them. So decided to pursue those. And I liked the courses, the topics, like statistics, computer science on its own is fairly interesting to me. That being said, I'm not sure how much fun I'd have every day. A lot of people that study those things like go, crunch numbers for like Wall Street or, do different kinds of analysis. And I think you could do that. Like there are jobs in, studying like drug trials and doing things in biology or finance, like I said. But I'm not sure how much the material appeals to me beyond getting to apply it to baseball. Like that's what really fires me up and makes me the most passionate. So studied those two fields, statistics, computer science, largely because I wanted to get into baseball and thought they would help. But in a vacuum, I also had, thought the classes were interesting by themselves too.
And Ryan, to end your Harvard career here, you did write a senior paper, and when I was researching, not stalking your LinkedIn, what did you write your senior paper on, and what did you get as a grade?
So to answer the second one, they let me graduate, so I think that means I passed.
That was a humble way of saying a 100, Stephen.
Yeah, I
Heads
know.
up.
He's so humble.
So they don't. I'm not sure they actually give letter grades for your thesis, but in order, some students, you don't necessarily have to write a thesis. In order to do a double major, you have to like find some project that like combines the two fields of study, and you have to write a paper about that. So to study statistics and computer science, I had to write a paper about a topic. So unsurprisingly, we've talked a lot about how I like baseball and like numbers. So my senior thesis, I wrote about trying to predict the next pitch type that would be thrown. So based on like a pitcher's repertoire, his like past pitches thrown, the batter he's facing, some of their strengths and weaknesses. Can we try to use like different statistical techniques to predict like whether a fastball, a breaking ball, an off-speed pitch will be thrown? And the results were honestly pretty underwhelming. It's kind of a surprise they said the paper passed, because you couldn't do much better than like a coin flip, or just predicting the pitcher's like most common offering, which on one hand was a bit surprising. I thought there'd be like some sort of signal there that you could pull out. On the other hand, like at this point, I'm sure if there were, abilities to do that, like teams would have found them and tried to correct for them to some extent. And so it ended up being like much to do about nothing. I like wrote a whole paper about not really finding anything, which was kind of a bummer. not the funnest conclusion. Would have been a lot more exciting if we'd actually found something worth writing home about. But like I said, they did let me pass, so I think all's well that ends well.
I love that the VP of Baseball Solutions senior paper was on that. That's always a good sign. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I was just going to say, future lifeguard and Marlins VP of Baseball Solutions, Ryan Plunkett, joining us here on the Hot Stove Show. Hey, look, let's get into a little bit of what you're doing now. I'm not sure how to ask this, Ryan, because I would venture to say you know more about the game than I ever will. But in order to be in your shoes, how much do you have to know about the game? Do you need to know every intricacy to hitting and running, to pitches, to outfield and sprint speed and all this stuff to then dive into numbers? Or are there parts of the game that people would be surprised that you don't really know much about, but that's not where you're supposed to be diving into, I guess, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think as like front offices grow and expand, roles become like a bit more specialized. So I'm definitely not an expert in anything. Wouldn't claim to be an expert in everything by any stretch of the imagination. And I think my role, at least historically with the Phillies, and my role here and my experience thus far, is going to be much more focused on the data side rather than like the operational transactional side. Like I'm familiar with free agency, familiar with option status, familiar with rosters and whatnot. But if you want to get into the intricacies of contracts and minor league free agents and whatnot, I would say that's not necessarily my area of expertise, and I don't think it's supposed to be. There are plenty of folks on staff here that are much more qualified, much more talented than me in those areas, and would obviously to defer to them. When it comes to data and numbers, I think I'm relatively fluent across like most spheres of baseball when it comes to pitching analytics, hitting analytics, defensive analytics, sprint speed, things of that nature. I'd say historically, most of my research is focused on hitting and pitching. I think those are the areas where we have the most data. And so naturally, those are the areas we kind of gravitate towards to do research. So I'm going to be most comfortable talking about those. That being said, there's plenty of modeling work to be done when it comes to catcher defense and framing, when it comes to hit probability and out probability, and using those to evaluate infielders and outfielders, and then base runners when it comes to stolen base probability and break-even rates and whatnot. So I feel relatively comfortable talking across all those areas and like on-field data, numbers, things of that nature. Feel relatively good when it comes to transactional and compliance and rules. That I'm comfortable with those probably more so than the average fan or even the most tuned in fans, but definitely not the foremost expert in the office. And I mean, I don't think they're expecting me to be. I hope I'm not supposed to be that guy. But yeah, I'd say as the office grows and roles continue to expand and develop, I think people are becoming a bit more like specialized, like in their lanes, rather than being generalists that have to know everything about everything.
Ryan, I hope this isn't a lazy question, but I'm just really curious to know, and you can use Kyle and I as like players, but you know, what is something you would look at? If I'm like a shortstop or I'm a fielder, like what are some of the things that you are looking at? And then are you sort of the middleman of then telling the coaches like, hey, we feel like this guy can get better on his release, on his, his first jump? Like, I guess I'm asking for an example of some of the things that you're looking at on the field or in the box or whatever it may be that you're collecting and observing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the game has trended a bit more towards like breaking performance down into like latent skills or like underlying talent. So rather than looking at like a player's, OPS or his WRC plus or whatever metric you want to use, we're trying to look at like the individual components that sort of like sum up to those things. So for hitters, we can obviously look at their box score stats and whatnot and how they performed, but
Sure.
When talking about like offensive performance, it seems like you can generally break things down into like, does this hitter swing at the right pitches? When he swings at the right pitches, does he make contact? When he makes contact, does he hit the ball hard? And when he hits the ball hard, does he hit the ball in the air? If he can answer yes to all four of those questions, like he's probably a pretty good player. And even if he can only say yes to 2 or 3 of those, he's probably a decent player. And so I think a lot of this role and a lot of analysis in general is trying to, develop those questions, figure out which are the right questions to ask, and then how can we use data, how can we use models to like answer those best, and can we get 1% better at answering those questions in each area. And then to develop those questions, to devise them, it's a lot of talking with coaches. So what makes a hitter good, what makes a pitcher good, then like coming up with a baseline model or trying to a first pass at a solution and ask guys like, what, does this pass the sniff test? Who are we too high on? Who are we too low on? And then over time, like trying to track players' performance in those areas. We think player X, he hits the ball really hard, but he hits it on the ground too frequently. From a coaching perspective, I don't know how to make the intervention to get him to change that. I think he'd be a better player if he could change that. So you kind of bring it to the coach's attention and say, do you think this is feasible? Give you the latitude to implement that however you want and make the changes you see fit. And then can we track that over time? Like, hey, with player X, we talked with him 2 weeks ago. We tried to make a change. Can we look at his performance before that date and after that date? Do we see any changes? As him, now he's hitting the ball in the air more, but he's whiffing more frequently, kind of like the consistent cat and mouse game. Things
Sure.
are always, you fix one area and then a leak starts in the other, and we're just trying to plug holes and move things around. And so it's definitely not my role to speak with players. I have no playing experience, like I said, beyond bad high school player, and no coaching experience. But I think the idea is to, be comfortable enough with the data to talk with some of our analysts in the office, and then translate some of that to our coaches that can then bring it to players and decide how they want to intervene and actually make the changes we're recommending, or if those changes are feasible. So, yeah, I don't get in the weeds with players. Don't think that's my space, but try to, work with coaches to ask and answer questions that, help us, better understand the game and better understand players.
Forgive me if you heard me typing when you were talking, but I was listening to so much, Ryan, and I was writing down some questions I would like to ask you as I hear you talk. My first would be as you dive into a player, take player X. Is the first place you go FanGraphs just to get an overarching view of the individual, or do you immediately dive into software and information that I could not obtain by going to MLB.com, Baseball Reference, or FanGraphs?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. We do have some, proprietary metrics that we'll look at and that we feel good about. That being said, the questions that I just, alluded to and kind of described, like, I think you get a decent feel for a lot of those by pulling up FanGraphs or Baseball Savant. So, like, what is, does a player swing at the right pitches? If you want to look at his, like, in-zone swing rates or his chase rates, like, you can find those publicly. If you want to, break that down a bit further and, like, model players like hot zones or his cold zones, like how much damage is he going to do when he swings? We have some internal metrics that I think, do a better job capturing that and layering on, like, individual like zone preferences and player skills that may be more difficult to access from public sites. But I think you can get a decent approximation of some of these metrics by looking at what's available publicly. Same thing, like does a player, when he swings, does he make contact? That, you can answer with in-zone contact rates or just overall swing and miss rates. That being said, you might want to like control for pitch quality. We want to penalize a player more for swinging and missing at the 92-mile-an-hour fastball than a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, just because like the baseline expectations for those pitches are probably a bit different. And so I think it's harder to get like that level of granularity in the public sphere. But I think if you want to devise your own framework for evaluating a hitter, or you can do the same thing on the pitching side, you can get like okay approximations for a lot of things that teams are looking at least from like the performance data side. Just using publicly available data for sure.
Well, Ryan, that was amazing, and I can't believe we're 27 minutes in, and we really appreciate all the time you're giving us. So you were with the Phillies for 7 years, is that correct?
Yeah, it depends how you count my intern years. I started interning in 2017 and 18,
Okay.
and I started full-time in 19. So if you count those intern seasons, it was 8 seasons with the club, which was a lot of fun. Will always be a special place, special people for me. But excited to get going here as well.
And that was your first job out of Harvard, correct?
Yes, so I graduated from school in 2019, and then that was like late May, early June, and then I think by the start of July, I had found a place to live in Philly and moved in and started full time there.
So you're there for 7 years, and Peter Bendix and you have a conversation, or you go through your interview process. Just walk us through what about his vision was, or what he said that made you leave. Obviously, a really good situation in Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, I love Philly. Like I said, special place, special people, and I'll always have a soft spot for it. Like you said, they kind of gave me an opportunity coming out of school and took a chance on me in many ways. So love the place and owe a ton to them, but was excited by the opportunity to come down here and build something together. And talking with Peter and his vision, was really excited how he saw the game, how he saw this role, how he saw me fitting in, and a lot of the people that he's already brought in. I'm super excited to work with the staff. I think the front office is really talented. I think the coaching staff that they've brought in is really talented. And, looking at the office directory compared to other clubs, I think it's, maybe smaller in nature, but the talent density, if you will, the skills that they have that brought in relative to the number of people is really, really high. So I think the group he's assembling here is super impressive. I'm excited to work with our farm director, our scouting director, excited to work with our coaching staff in the big leagues and the minor leagues, and excited to work with all those people in Philly as well. I love what I did there, no ill will whatsoever, but the opportunity to build something together and apply some of what I've learned in Philadelphia and try to bring that here was really appealing. I don't want to replicate that by any stretch. I think there's some things they do well, some things they do less well. I have some opinions. Other folks that Peter's brought in, I'm sure, have their own opinions. And, don't want to do Philadelphia 2.0. I want to do Miami 1.0 and do it really, really well. So I think the vision, the group he's like assembling is super exciting. And it's going to be fun to be a part of. So it's scary to leave. I won't lie. Philadelphia was awesome, and I will miss it quite a bit. But I'm also pretty fired up by this opportunity and looking forward to really hitting the ground running.
Ryan, the job to me seems very big league driven. How much involvement do you have in the minor leagues and number crunching down there on the farm?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. We'll be able to touch like every arm of the organization. Some of the models that we work on, I think will scale fairly well. Like if we talk about a pitch quality model, that's, dependent on how fast the pitcher throws, where he locates, how much the ball moves. We're really fortunate that unless you're playing on the moon, that more or less like scales everywhere, right?
Okay.
Where like a strikeout rate or a walk rate and ERA, those are things that are, somewhat dependent on the ballpark that you play in, or like the defense you're playing in front of, the lineup that you're going against. But, if my fastball, is thrown this hard with this much movement in this location, we could be playing in Miami, we can play in Jacksonville, we can play in Beloit, we can look at college players, and like those physical properties of pitch, they kind of, they exist in a vacuum anywhere. And so I think a lot of the work will be collaborating with the big league coaching staff and whatnot to bring our insights to the field in Miami, but we can also use those models to evaluate our minor league players and see, are our pitchers getting better? When we promote a player, his performance status is probably going to get a little worse just because he's facing better competition and the game gets harder. But we can look at his pitch quality and say, he's just getting unlucky or he's facing better players. So you don't really need to hit the panic button. Like, we know it's all the same stuff. He's just leveling up. It's going to take a minute. Or when looking at college players, we can look and say, his pitch quality is great. He just plays in a stadium that's, like 290 feet down the line. He's going to give up a lot of home runs. It is what it is. When he plays in, a more representative ballpark, things are going to level out. And so I think the idea is, the closer we get to those players, like underlying skill level, try to strip out like some of the quality of competition and some of that context to just figure out how good is this player. We can then apply those models across like all levels of baseball, whether it's pro, amateur, international, and try to like use those insights everywhere, not just the big leagues. So I think there will be a heavy emphasis on MLB, but the goal would be to build things that scale down even farther as far as we can go.
Interesting. Go ahead, Steven. You want to ask one? I've got plenty.
No,
but seriously, go right ahead.
When Ryan was just talking about just some of those underlying numbers, I mean, whenever I think underlying numbers that were a little bit misleading, I just think of an individual in Jonah Bride, the Marlins acquired from Oakland, and a guy that didn't have a ton of playing time there. But what we were told was he's an analytical darling, and you gave him a full year of playing, and you saw what kind of year he had. So it's just really interesting to see just kind of the strategy behind behind the scenes on some of this. But Ryan, I wanted to just quickly ask you, because I just tried to bridge the gap with you and Gabe Kapler. I know he managed in Philadelphia. Did you have any overlap there?
Yeah, I was there his last full-time season in Philly, and then one of my intern years he was there as well. So we didn't work too much together on the day-to-day. That is crazy story. I've now met Gabe a few times. The first time I was 7 years old. And so, like I said, I grew up in the Boston area, was a really big Red Sox fan as a kid. He was on the 2004 team that broke the curse. And Gabe Kapler and Kevin Millar were signing autographs at a mall near us. And so me, my mom, and one of my mom's sisters waited in line at the mall for Gabe Kapler and Kevin Millar's autograph. And I have a photo of 7-year-old me with Gabe at the mall, which we'd forgotten about. But my mom and aunts love Gabe Kapler. They thought he was pretty cute. So that photo, I think, was more memorable for them than it was for me. But so then I get hired by the Phillies as an intern. Gabe gets hired as the manager, and they bring that up. So I actually, at the end of my internship, I printed out that photo and asked if he'd sign it.
Gosh!
Brought it home in like 2018 or 2019, and they gave a copy to my mom. And she thought that was funny. Like, put it somewhere in the house, like on the kitchen table, on the countertop. And again, kind of forgot about it for a while. And then the Marlins, this process started. I happened to interview with Gabe Kapler again. And so got to tell him, he remembered meeting me in Philly. He did not remember that we'd met when I was 7 years old. But kind of like a weird full circle, history keeps repeating itself here. So once again, now not only do I have a photo with Gabe Kapler that's signed by Gabe, I actually, am coworkers with him once again. So.
Your office is right next door.
Yeah, so I don't, didn't ask him for an autograph during the interview. So hopefully that went over okay. But no, it's did overlap with him in Philly, and kind of a weird full circle story there.
Right. This is more probably the nuts and bolts of it, but it's interesting to me. I almost view in my mind your job is like, it's like two different jobs. There's like the off-season job and then the in-season stuff. And I'll ask you about the in-season stuff in a moment. The structure of the department, as an executive, you have multiple people underneath you. I'm sure you guys continue to look to build that out, and you'll have a whole crew of folks underneath you. But if I'm Peter Bendix and I say, we're thinking and we're very interested in player X, when he says, Ryan, what do you have on player X? Can you explain to me the hierarchy and the structure of your department? Do you immediately start divvying up certain responsibilities of player X to people underneath you? Or like when a player gets put on a notepad in front of you, where do you start and how do you delegate work here?
Yeah, I think ideally we talked a lot about breaking players down into these individual components. And I think that is optimal for like evaluating a player and like analyzing him and developing him, is like finding out like where is he good, where is he bad, where does he struggle, where can we intervene. That being said, it's not really helpful to have a ton of different numbers. We think he's really good in these 3 areas and really poor in these 3 areas. It's like, well, just how good is he, period. So I think the goal is to break him down into a bunch of different components, and then almost like build him back up. Different components are probably worth different amounts. Just because he's really above average in one area and really below average in one area doesn't necessarily mean it cancels out to 0. So I think we try to like have those component models and then build additional models that kind of like build the player back up. And then, we need to translate that into units we can measure and quantify. It's one thing to say a player like has really good bat speed. Okay, cool. That's helpful. That's useful. It's good for tracking. But like, how many runs is bat speed worth? How many wins is that worth? How many dollars is that worth? And I think about all those steps and conversions is sort of like an assembly line where we like break the player down and then, build him back up into these different components that we need to, weigh each of those components and then translate it into runs, wins, dollars, whatever our currency that we're using is. And so I think right now, still, onboarding and figuring out what we currently have access to, what we need to, tweak and get better at, and where we think we're okay. And so ideally, I think about like assembly line, we're probably going to have sub-departments, individual analysts, individual groups kind of like own each step of that process, where like the outputs of one model, the outputs of one analyst's work almost become the inputs to the next person's work, and just kind of like pass the baton down the line until we get to a number that we feel good about. And like evaluating the player, we project he's going to be this good, which is worth this much, and this is what we're willing to offer him as a free agent or in trade. This is how good we think we are, where our holes are, and how we're going to try to address them. So I think still to get my feet under me here and figuring it out. But when we think about like the vision for the department or how we're going to go about breaking down players, I like to think of it in that like assembly line. Each person owns like one step in the process.
Ryan, I have 2 more, Stephen, and I know you're in Dallas, Ryan. I should have started that by saying you're at the winter meetings with all of your new colleagues. I have 2 more, Stephen. I want to be very respectful of your time, Ryan. Do you have more, Stephen?
I just have one more left, and yes,
fire away. Yeah, I'll ask mine real quick.
Good. No rush. No rush.
You want to go first, Kyle? Or you want me to go?
Go ahead. No, feel free. Go right ahead.
When we talked with Peter, I think it was last week, when he started talking about the hiring of you, I had to write this down. He said, quote, the intellectual curiosity that he showed, the leadership traits, even though he's pretty young in his career, and the culture fit that he is, he's going to enhance our culture and make the people around him better, close quote. And I know people like you who are so humble and so intellectual, beyond my realm of possibility. You like to be humble, but I need you to try to be a little bit, I don't want to say cocky, but I'd love for you to share just the cultural fit. Why do you think Peter had said that? We know about the brains, we know about the solutions, but what about the culture, you as a person, that you feel you're going to benefit the organization?
Well, thank you for all that, and thank you to Peter for saying that. No, that quote was tremendous. My mom was really, really happy to read that. I was really happy to read that. So
got to keep mom away from, by the way, from Gabe. Now that you're in close proximity, you got to make sure you have to lock her out.
You said it. Yeah, she gets no tickets this year. But no, thank you for saying all that. And yeah, it's big shoes to fill. It's a tough quote to live up to, but excited about the opportunity and the challenge. I think one of the things I'm proudest about in Philly was just connecting with a variety of groups and stakeholders, and people that didn't always have the same background as me. Like I said, don't have much of a playing background beyond high school, don't have a scouting background, don't have a coaching background, but ended up being placed in situations where I had to engage with a lot of those folks. One of the things I often allude to that was really important for my career and helps me a lot. It's terrible to say it, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and I hope we don't have to go through it again, but would be the pandemic. A lot of our coaches, a lot of the industry had never, had to use like Zoom calls before, and now Zooms are commonplace. We're talking on a Zoom equivalent right now, but had to help a lot of our coaches get onboarded with Zoom in 2020. And that terrified me. Like I had nothing in common. What am I going to talk about with a coach? I'm, in my early 20s. I went to an Ivy League school. I never played, and I'm just stuck on the phone with a coach that's older, that got drafted out of high school, that's been in pro ball for 30 years. It's just like, what do we have in common? I'm an introvert. I'm not a conversationalist. Like, how is this going to go? Like, we're just stuck on hold. Like, I'm an IT professional. We just got to make conversational someone's computer reboots. And just like learn to talk with someone, right? And like, it sounds silly in hindsight, but that was big for me. Just like, what makes people tick? How do you like interact and engage with baseball folks? And you find out you have more in common than you think. I got really good advice from one of my friends in Philadelphia. Like, when you're not sure what to talk about with someone in baseball, like ask them about their players and ask them about their family. And people just tend to light up, and you can usually find something in common there. So, scouts and coaches are always on the road and they never see their families. So you ask them and they just want to talk about their kids and talk about their wives and talk about their families. And then you want to talk about players, who do you like, who do you dislike, what are you working on? And just like let them talk and bring the conversation to you. So I try to use that approach with coaches and with scouts. And again, I don't have that experience and can't relate to them in that way, but we're all chasing the same thing, right? Like, we want to be happy in life, and we want to find good players, and we want to help our teams win. And so, at the time, I didn't feel like I had a ton in common with them. I still don't feel like I have a ton in common with them, but I was hopefully able to meet in the middle, establish some, like universal common ground to stand on. And I'm proud of that. It was really scary. I still feel a little uncomfortable, and everyone feels like an imposter at times, working with pro athletes, former pro players, former big leaguers, but try to bring that and try to fit into the culture and add to the culture and see what we can do.
Introverted and not being a conversationalist is music to my ears, Ryan. I'd love to be friends with you. I could sit in a room and not talk to somebody for hours. And
I've tried to go out with Kyle for 3 months now to watch some football games. He keeps telling me he's busy.
Yeah, bowl season. Football season's almost over. All right, I got 2 more for you, Ryan, because I know you got a lot to do out there in Dallas.
Go for it.
If during the season, Peter's obviously not privy to everything you're doing as a department every day. He's got a ton of roles and responsibilities. There's going to be a lot of work that you're doing in stuff that you're uncovering that maybe the others don't know about. If you uncover something, let's say Stephen brought up Jonah Bride's name. Let's say he's a big part of the team this year. And through your research and all your digging and you and your crew, you find something. Where does your research go when you're convicted enough that what you want to tell somebody could help that player with so much on the line? Does it go to an assistant GM who then funnels it to the clubhouse? I'm really talking nuts and bolts. How do you disseminate your information once you're convicted that you have something that you really think could help?
Yeah, I think like once we do our research and feel good about it, then we want to document everything we work on. We want to like share that with our department. We want to review it, make sure everyone feels good about it, from the analysts that worked on it to their peers to department leadership to me and whatnot. And then, when we feel good about it, I think we want to bring it and surface it, whether it's to the AGMs, to other VPs, to Peter himself, and get them comfortable. And the big thing for me is, I think, getting the analysts themselves, the people that did the work, let them get comfortable presenting it and get them some face time. I think the folks that actually do the work, deserve the opportunity to grow and learn from that and present their work. And I think in large part, I, have this opportunity because my supervisors in Philly gave me those chances. So I think it's kind of my goal to be the middleman and manage in some sense, but definitely don't want to like take the credit from my group or, use that opportunity just myself. So I think my role is to like vet our findings and determine what we think is worthwhile to bring. And then, I think we want to document everything. We want to have internal write-ups, and we want to surface that to the group. And we also just want to have like automatic processes in place. So when we improve a model, and again, like we get better at, estimating like one of those steps in the process, then it just kind of like flows into the assembly line, like I said, and those like final numbers that get spit out into like our internal platform and like player evaluation systems. But we can just trust them. And all of a sudden that player's like value is going to increase. And we want to be able to explain why. If folks ask, interpretability is a big thing for us. But ideally, I think we want to establish, automated processes and enough credibility that as we get like incrementally better at these things, we don't necessarily have to like call a meeting to discuss it or like necessarily, flag things explicitly. We just kind of want all the steps in the pipeline to like update and get the latest and best values in front of folks, and then let them use that, like make decisions as quickly as possible, and hopefully they feel comfortable with those changes.
Fascinating. My last one for you. We love baseball, but do you have a hard time watching the game as a fan now? When now that you work for the Marlins, and I don't know, answer this too. I don't know how much you'll be traveling and how much we'll see you during the year. But if you're up in the GM suite and Sandy's pitching and he looks great, but he's been missing outside all night long, does that make you want to grab your computer and find out why immediately, or is it post game, or do you just once the ball is thrown at 6:40, you just watch the game as a fan?
Yeah, it's tough. I do. I still love watching baseball. I still love baseball. That being said, I do think I watch it differently. I think I mentioned this earlier in the call that I feel super lucky and super blessed that my hobby became my job. That being said, like I feel like I need a new hobby at times, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to say you like burn yourself out, but to your point, like when I'm watching baseball, I think I'm thinking more analytically, thinking more critically than I did probably 10, 15 years ago when you just watch a game for fun. So in one way, I've become a bigger basketball fan as a result of that. Now I think I can watch the NBA a little more casually, and that's like my sports outlet. Like my competitive juices still get flowing, but I'm not thinking as critically. Where to your point, like as a game is ongoing, like I'll love to pull up some of the data feeds and just have a feel for how guys look, what's different today, are there any changes, things that we should be aware of. So I think I do like struggle to turn off the like analyst brain, if you will. Yeah. That being said, like still enjoy watching baseball and have a lot of fun with that, especially when the crowd is getting into it. It's high leverage moments and things of that nature. There's a lot of stuff that like, we still can't prove. A lot of data suggests that like the clutch factor isn't real, but like you watch enough games and see enough, high leverage moments, it doesn't like, you still feel like your heart rate speed up. And you're like, if I were in this situation, I don't know how well I'd perform. And so it does make you question and like, is there a human element that like we can't measure? And so I think, yes, it's forced me to watch other sports to like be more of a casual fan. That being said, I still try to keep some of the casual fandom in me when I watch baseball, because I do think that's what makes it fun. The unpredictability, the excitement, and those leverage moments. You can't really beat it.
Well, this has been incredible. Folks, that was aspiring lifeguard and as a hobby, the vice president of baseball solutions for the Miami Marlins, Ryan Plunkett. Ryan, enjoy the rest of your time in Dallas.
Much.
It really was. It's been so great to meet you, and I hope Stephen and I can just catch up with you soon, whether it's at the ballpark or up in Jupiter. Would love to learn more about what you do. It's incredible work. So thank you again for joining us on the Hot Stove Show.
Of course. No, this was awesome. Thank you guys for having me. I had a great time.
Well, you had some time to run to the grocery store there, do a little laundry, sneak in a workout, whatever you'd like to do. But that was a lot of fun earlier in the week, Stephen, to interview Ryan. I thought he was just another one of those really interesting guys, man. You know, there's just so many young.
Is this our first non-drive line guy? Think it is?
Yeah, and I'm sure if you dig far enough, you find a connection there. Well, no, I mean, but just that Harvard pedigree and working with the Phillies. The one thing that he said that I actually thought was really, really interesting.
Go ahead.
And I think, and I kind of try to think about everything else that people have told us too. He said, I don't want to make this the Phillies 2.0. I just want this to be the Marlins 1.0, and I think Clayton McCulla doesn't want this to be the Dodgers 2.0, because how could you replicate that? Like,
right.
Ohtani and Betts and Freeman, they're not walking through the door, but what you can do is do this your own unique way.
Yep.
There's no linear path seemingly to win. So I found that to be very interesting, but just a fun conversation, man. I thought it was really fun.
No, and I completely agree with you, because I think a lot of times when you're hiring someone, it's like, all right, this is exactly how they're going to do it at the old place. And I think the biggest thing, and it's not just baseball, I think with just life and especially like in this industry, I just remember talking to different broadcasters, and it's like, yeah, some of the stuff is just theirs, like I'm not going to replicate Colin Cowherd, but I can take little things that I like about his broadcasting skills that I'm going to apply to my own game. And that's sort of what we're seeing with each one of these hires is like, yeah, the Phillies have been really successful. It does not mean Ryan's going to bring every little thing that he did in Philadelphia to Miami. He's going to bring the things that he thinks will work here. And and the other stuff that doesn't. So yeah, and it's also, as we kind of segue into our next segment, I do want to end on this. I think it's just the human element of these things, right? Like, he was a guy from Boston. He was a Red Sox fan. That, I think one of the things when you look at especially people in baseball ops is, they're so much more intellectually, or like you put him on a pedestal, and look, he would blow me away in any sort of IQ test. I'm not going to say that he wouldn't. But even just the Gabe Kapler story, man, it just humanizes these guys, right? Like, this is someone that stayed in line, looking for his autograph, and you go for full circle, and he ends up with the Phillies, and now in his interview, with Gabe Kapler. So that human element is pretty cool too. But all in all, really excited. I can't be understated. I know we say it about every single individual we have on here, but super pumped to see their impact. Yeah, and it'll be your time to shine here in a moment as we wrap things up with Love It or Leave It. Do have a message here for the folks in a moment. The other thing I was thinking too, and just, listening to all these guys, to me, there's no delusion as to the uphill battle that they have to climb, and like the hill they have to climb. They're not starting at the top and sliding down and having fun doing so. I just get the sense that Peter has them all on the same page, and they're all working under the same kind of premonition. Like, we know what we need to do. Like, we know this isn't going to be easy. There will be challenges along the way, but we're all tugging on the same side of the rope. Now, of course, you'll be in, meetings in rooms where, you might tug a little different way, but ultimately that's going to lead you to the best decision. It just really does seem to me, not that I would expect anything differently, but all these new folks that are being hired by Peter, the message is clear upon the point of signing on the dotted line that, we know what we're tasked with here. We know what it's going to take to get there, and we're all going to collectively do it. So that's my thought there. Hey, before I send it to you, Stephen, and we get the music rolling here, wanted to remind everybody that you become a Marlins member here in 2025. It's December 12th. That's going to be hard to say 2025 as we wrap up 2024. But go to marlins.com/membership and become a member today, man. It's really cool. I know we talk about this a lot, Stephen. But we always encourage people to come hang out with us and come by the booth. Can't do it on a whim, but, give us a little heads up, give us a little notice. We always try to treat the Marlins members, if they have any interest in what the heck we're doing up there, to come see us, come say hello, come get involved. By the way, that's not your only perk to becoming a Marlins member. Yeah. In fact, there's about 155 cooler things to do besides come see us in front of it. But every time I do that, the selling point. Yeah, every time I do the read, I just want to remind everybody, man, we appreciate everybody's support, and if there's anything we can ever give back to you guys, and you become Marlins members, and even if you're not a Marlins member and you come to a game or two a year and you don't have the means to become a member, but you want to come say hello, we'll make sure we get you upstairs, because everybody's support of us and what we're doing and trying to bring people Marlins baseball means the world to us. But without further ado, it is the best segment of the week, and it is showtime, Stephen. Thank you very much, Kyle. Okay. Picking the order is big, because you don't want to empty your top bullets, right? You don't want to empty your top bullets and Love It or Leave It, because then I'll lose you. We want to start off, not like entirely blow your socks off, but we want to give you something to chew on a little bit. And I think this was the story of the week, and it was Juan Soto signing with the New York Mets, of course, going from the New York Yankees across town to the New York Mets. 15 years, $765 million. I'm not even going to ask you a question on whether you like the fit, whether you think the money's outrageous. You love it or you leave it?
So I will start with, you gave me a little bit of advance notice, some of what the Love It or Leave It questions would be. I thought about this one, and for the first time ever in Love It or Leave It, I'm going to do both. Okay? I'm going to leave it, because I do not want to see that guy 13 times a year. That's why I need to leave it. I don't want to see that guy at Lone Depot Park 6-7 times a year and 6 or 7 more times in Queens. I love it because it's awesome for baseball.
Yeah.
It's so good for baseball. I can't wait to watch Juan Soto as a fan face the Marlins for the next 15 years.
Yep.
And the people saying baseball is dead, I saw there was $1.5 billion invested the last 72 hours in Dallas. Ohtani signs his ginormous deal last year. Baseball's never been in the better spot, man. So I love it and leave it for the first time in show history, Stephen.
Here's what I think is first. You never you're always like, you like it. You're always on the fence. So you do that. I can't even speak to you. But I think what's interesting about this story, and I don't know how much of it's true. I think it's comical that it ultimately, some of it comes down to a security guard not letting in his chef or not letting in his family one particular. The idea of that is just like so funny, like a random June 2nd game. And it's like, this made her broke it. Like, that's it. I'm not signing long-term because of this incident. And then we discussed this before. I gotta be honest with you. Brian Cashman sticking to his guns and saying, we're not going to give you this suite for free. We haven't done it for Jeter. We're not going to do it for Judge. We're not going to do it to you. Some may call that stupid. I respect that on the behalf of him, but I know it's just kind of been comical to see some of the tidbits that have come across why he didn't sign with the Yankees.
Yes, and I know we were chatting about this earlier in the week. While I do have to have some respect for Brian Cashman doing that, if Brian Cashman called Aaron Judge and said, Aaron, quick question, we're willing to give Juan $760. He just wants a suite. Do you mind if we give him the suite for free? I know we didn't do it for you. Yeah.
I get it.
I'm sure he would have said, Brian, no problem.
It's the Yankee way. I'm sure Nelly loved it. All right, love it or leave it here. This is another interesting one. The NHL sent out a tweet from one of their journalists from the Board of Governors.
Ooh.
The Florida Panthers are closing in on hosting an outdoor game as soon as next season, and this was parentheses, at Marlins Park. That was Elliot Friedman. Love it or leave it, a little hockey at the Depot.
I love it. I believe that's going to get done. If you remember some years back, they were able to do that in the winter in Los Angeles at Dodger Stadium. Lone Depot Park would make an even seemingly easier transition. I was actually reading about it last night. The thing you have to worry about is the humidity.
Sure.
In effect, if you do it in December or January here in Florida, you're not going to have a whole lot of humidity to begin with. But the Marlins, along in conjunction with the NHL and the Panthers, can pump air conditioning into the place, close everything. They can take the humidity out of the place. And if they wanted to open it up, which they would for 3 hours for the game, they could do it. There wouldn't be an issue. I love it. I think it's going to be a spectacle. The even cooler thing to me is that when you think Florida, December, January, that's kind of like Winter Classic. They've been doing Stadium Series stuff. I think there's a really good chance that the Winter Classic could be the main event, not just one of the Stadium Series games.
What team makes sense, you think, to play the Panthers? Is it just the obvious, keep it in state and do the Lightning and the Panthers?
No. Well, I think that would be good. That's a great call. The heated rivalry right now with the Panthers would be the Bruins.
The Bruins.
If you got the Panthers and the Bruins down here, those two teams hate each other going back to the last two conference finals. And Panthers coming back 2 years ago down 3-0. And then they just mollywopped them and wiped them clean last year. Those two teams hate each other. They opened up the season against each other this year.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. I don't love it, and here's why. I'm a Minnesota guy. So what do I expect?
Well, you're a New Jersey guy, but you have roots in Minnesota.
What do I expect during a Winter Classic? I expect some snow. I expect some, when I'm breathing, I could see that breath. I could see the crispness coming from it. We're not going to get that here. I expect Patrick Kane, Chicago Blackhawks. I expect Detroit Red Wings, Gustav Nyquist, okay, with some snow coming down. Maybe they can make some fake snow. But when I think of hockey, outdoors, I think of cold. I think of brisk. I think of snowflakes. I think of seeing the breath. Doesn't mean I'm leaving it. I love the idea of it being at Marlins at Lone Depot Park. But it's not going to have the same feel. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not going to have the same feel.
You're not loving it or leaving it. It sounds like you are poo-pooing the tens of millions of dollars that it could bring into the community for like a week or so. It could also really help the organization, Stephen.
I'm back on it. I love it. I think
you should love it.
Really
yes,
love
sir.
It. I love it for the Marlins. Okay.
I do understand what you're saying, though. The first one ever was in Buffalo, New York, at Ralph Wilson Stadium, featuring the Sabres and the Penguins. Sidney Crosby in his toque in like 4 inches of snow buried the game-winning shootout. I'll never forget the first ever Winter Classic. It was great, but and I do understand.
I'm just being a
but let's put some millions. Let's put the millions into the pockets of the people.
Exactly. I agree. Okay. Love it or leave it. Davis and De Los Santos being in the opening day lineup.
I'm going to leave it for now. Unless the kid totally shines in spring training, and even then I think that's difficult to find a benchmark. God, I know he had a great year last year. 40-something homers in the minor leagues, led the minor leagues in homers.
Yep.
Unless there's a real need to have him serve as the DH or something, I'm going to leave it for now. I think we're going to end up loving him. I think he might need 50 to 75 at bats, maybe the month of April. If it looks good, power's there, I think you bring him up then. It won't be long before we see him.
I would say leave it too, and I would also say this, and you have to keep this within reason as well. When a general manager, or in our case, a president of baseball operations, trades for an individual, this is Peter Bendix's baby. I mean, De Los Santos is his baby, and I think you tend sometimes to give them a little bit more time, making sure he's comfortable and making sure, kind of like a situation with Jackson Holiday, where you don't walk into putting him up there, he struggles, and now you got to bring him back down, then you got to bring him back up. Who am I thinking of? Who came out and said, we're going to bring him up, and then we're not going to even think about it? Was it James Wood?
James Wood. Mike Rizzo. Yes, you're right.
With Mike Rizzo, he's like, I don't care if he goes 0 for 300, he's staying up here. I think Peter Bendix probably wants to get to that point with De Los Santos, and I think early on we talk about Bride, we talk about different guys being able to play first in DH. I tend to agree with you. I'm going to leave it, but he will be up, I think, at some point this season. Fair?
Yeah, it is fair. Another guy that kind of rings that bell for me would be a guy like Kyle Stowers, right?
Sure.
Stowers is kind of like, you just let him go. So, yeah.
Did you kill the music? I had one more. Thanks. This is the first ever Love It or Love It.
Oh, we did 3 Love It or Leave It's. I'm sorry. I was trying to
I had one more. I had one more for you. Love It or Love It. Our very own John Eric Alvarez, promoted to Vice President, Public Relations and Communications.
I'll leave it. This guy's on his high horse. You can't get the guy's impossible to get a hold of now. I love it. John Eric's been with the organization since 2011, 2012. Folks that are credentialed, they know him well. He's worked his tail off to get to where he is now. So I couldn't be more pumped for John Eric, and just super pumped for him to, he deserves to be a part of the executive team, and he's worked really hard for it, man. So, and we've always called him boss.
I know.
He's really the boss now. I mean, he is the full-fledged boss. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm super pumped for him too, as we can kill this music now. But I'm super excited for John Eric. He obviously deserved it, and I've only been here for 2 seasons. I know you've been here with him for a minute. You guys have been together for a while, so I know you've seen him kind of grow into what he is today, and it's really cool because he always has our back and we have his, and it's a really good thing that we got going on.
Well, for now, hopefully he continues to have our back.
I hope so too. Until I said that, I'm not sure about the Winter Classic coming here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough one.
I understand.
That's a tough one.
But you understand. Well, we'll know. We will know if John Eric listened to the whole thing, because we did we sung his praises at the hour and 43-minute mark of the show. So we'll know. He always says he listens.
We need to, how like at Ohio State you get stickers on your helmet. When you listen an hour 43 in, we got to give you something. We got to give you one of these mic what are these called again? I'm sorry.
Those are mic flags.
Mic flags. Yeah. Give you a mic flag.
All right, Stephen. Well, listen, this has been another fun show. We do not yet have a guest lined up for next week. We will, and we'll be
last one right before the new year. I think that's it, dude.
No, I think we can put shows in the can. I think we can bring people shows.
Am I just like abruptly assuming that like next week's our last show, and then
I'm pretty sure you are. I'm pretty sure we're capable of working right through the holiday, and as we part ways for the break, I'm pretty sure we could sneak in another show for the people. Yeah.
All right. Good
yeah.
stuff.
Actually, breaking news. We're going to keep working. We're working one day a week that you see us. We're working diligently on this, but actually, no, we're not going to take a break. We're going to roll right through the holidays. So, and we can
ain't
even
leaving.
re-record that show the week before, Stephen. How's that?
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
All right, listen, as we wrap things up, as always, thank you to everybody behind the scenes, creative department, John, Eric, his entire crew. They were helping us all week in Dallas. That's Stephen. I'm Kyle, and we'll see you next Thursday.